By now, most 2025 fantasy football drafts should be completed, but there are some players I think people are completely overlooking on the waiver wire ahead of week 1 of the NFL season. Today we're going to go over 4 players that are under-rostered in ESPN leagues that could help you win your fantasy league by having a breakout season and providing key performances that could win games. All of these players are rostered in less than 26% of ESPN leagues, so they should be available in pretty much every single league you're in this year. This also means they have basically no risk to add on the end of your bench. If they do end up scoring some points, proving their value, and sticking around on your bench, that means you've capitalized on some great value. And fantasy championships can be won by turning waiver wire ads into weekly starters. So if you're able to have some foresight before the season on who your league mates will be wishing they had drafted in the last round, that could help you win your championship in fantasy football. Let's go ahead and go with the first player here. That's Josh Palmer, newly signed wide receiver with the Buffalo Bills. He's only currently owned in 10.7% of ESPN leagues, which is an astronomically low number when you really think about it. He signed a 3-year, $29 million contract with Buffalo in free agency this offseason. And just to lay the land in the current wide receiver room, they have Khalil Shakir, who just signed an extension this offseason, as well as Keon Coleman, who they drafted last year. I do like Shakir for fantasy this season. I think he's going to continue to get a ton of volume. And while Keon Coleman did have his moments as a rookie, he flashed with some big plays as that big body receiver. He's a big question mark at the wide receiver 2 position right now. And if these reports of quarterback Josh Allen and Josh Palmer having chemistry in camp have any truth to them, Palmer could take over as the wide receiver 2 by mid-season. If you're unfamiliar with Palmer, over the past few years, he's been a pretty solid deep threat for the Los Angeles Chargers. He averaged 15 yards per catch in 2024, which was one of the best marks in the entire NFL. And like I mentioned before, reports have been coming out of Bills training camp that Josh Palmer and Josh Allen have been having a really strong connection. He also made a couple nice plays in preseason, which gives me a bit of optimism about his fantasy outlook. And while I do like the receivers in Buffalo's room, it's fair to say that there is some space for Palmer to really carve out a role. Now, I will mention that I also expect a bounce-back season from tight end Dalton Kincaid, but with a quarterback as good as Josh Allen, I think there will be quality targets to go around in this offense. And while Palmer is starting out as the wide receiver 3, I think he has the upside to work his way into the second overall target on this team. And if he does that, he could be a sneaky wide receiver to add onto the end of your bench right now, who could maybe even finish in the top 24 at his position. Again, this is a long shot, but with a guy who's only rostered in 10% of ESPN leagues, you're taking zero risk here in adding him. Palmer's always been a solid wide receiver throughout his career with the Chargers, but he has the chance to jump up to a new tier at the position. Especially with a quarterback like Josh Allen throwing him the football, we could see some pretty significant statistical increases, and he's one of my favorite waiver wire ads prior to week 1 in deep leagues. Moving on, we have Woody Marks, rookie running back for the Houston Texans. With recent news that Joe Mixon is going to miss at least the first month of the 2025 season with a lingering ankle injury, Woody Marks' stock is on the rise. And with how good of a prospect he was coming out of USC, I think he could really earn a role. And going back to Joe Mixon, he can miss even more than 4 games. We don't know the extent of the absence yet, and we haven't really been provided with a clear timeline. Texans GM Nick Caserio didn't really give us a clear answer when he was asked about the timetable of Joe Mixon's return, and he's currently on the non-football injury list. And as you can probably guess, Woody Marks is one of the players who's going to be receiving more volume in his absence. Now, I can't pretend that there's zero competition from elsewhere on the team. The Texans also added Nick Chubb on a cheap 1-year deal in free agency this offseason, but he suffered some serious knee and foot injuries over the past couple of years, so I'm very concerned about his injury history, and I think the Texans are as well. I don't think they brought him in to be their starting running back, and I think Marks as the younger, longer-term option could win the job. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Marks get a significant uptick in volume as soon as he outperforms Nick Chubb. Let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into Marks' profile. He was a 4th-round pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, and a player I really liked after I attended the Reese's Senior Bowl and watched him in action. The 5'10", 208-pound running back impressed me for several reasons in his tape. He's a very physical running back. He runs with a lot of strength, but he can also make defenders miss in the open field. He has no issue running through tackles, and he's a good running back in the goal line as well. For a guy that's only owned in 11.8% of ESPN fantasy leagues, he could be a starting running back towards mid-season. Now, Joe Mixon, I do expect to come back and take a ton of volume when he does, but for the first half of the season especially, Marks could be a very valuable fantasy asset. He's barely owned in any leagues. You should get him while no one knows his name. He is a true sleeper. I mentioned the Reese's Senior Bowl before. He displayed some really good skills as a receiver at that event. He could be a sneaky PPR option, especially if he gets involved in the receiving game early on with CJ Stroud. And who knows, maybe Joe Mixon misses more of the season than we initially thought. Marks could be extremely valuable. For at least the beginning portion of the season, you want to have him on your fantasy roster before week 1. Don't be surprised whenever he beats out Nick Chubb for the starting job, and during the first 4 weeks at least, he's going to be a productive fantasy asset. Let's move on to Dylan Sampson, another 4th-round rookie running back. Sampson was drafted early on day 3 of the 2025 NFL Draft by the Cleveland Browns. And if you know anything about the Browns running back situation at the moment, it's extremely murky. Obviously, Nick Chubb is no longer with the team. Like we just said, he signed with Houston this offseason. that left a major hole at running back heading into the draft. Cleveland fixed that by drafting 2 running backs, one in the second round, one in the fourth round. The fourth round running back, like we said before, was Sampson. Quinshon Judkins was the running back drafted in the second round out of Ohio State. He was a prospect I really like. He was my running back 5 in this year's class. He's a very physical runner with good acceleration. However, Judkins has battled some legal issues this offseason and still has not signed his rookie contract. And that could definitely change within the next few days, but right now, Judkins is a massive question mark in the Browns roster. Because of this, Sampson, who before I just thought of as a handcuff, could be the starting running back heading into week 1. And the best part is he's only owned in 25.7% of ESPN fantasy football leagues. And we can even think about the worst case scenario for Sampson as a fantasy asset. If Judkins signs before week 1 on his rookie contract, he has still missed so much time. He will have missed training camp and preseason. Those are a ton of valuable reps where he can earn trust with the coaching staff and show off how good of a running back he is. But he hasn't had that time, so maybe the coaching staff trusts Sampson more out of the gate and allows him to get more touches. Sampson had a couple good reps in preseason and was having a good training camp as well. And next to Jerome Ford in the backfield, he will be the top option for the Browns' rushing attack. And if Judkins isn't able to figure out this contract dispute, Sampson's draft capital, again a 4th round pick, should get him a bit of volume early on. Jerome Ford is a pretty solid running back, but they already know what he is. They'll want to see if Sampson can be the running back of the future. Again, many expect the Browns to be a pretty bad team. Maybe they want to get their young players reps going into next season. And who knows, best case scenario, Sampson, like Woody Marks, could be a very valuable running back to have on your fantasy roster in the first half of the season. And again, he's a guy you're adding on waivers right now. If not, you were able to get him in the last round of your fantasy draft, but the price and the risk is nothing. And you could be looking at the Browns starting running back in week 1 with the Tennessee product in Sampson. The last player on this list is tight end Jonnu Smith, who's currently on the Pittsburgh Steelers and owning 24% of ESPN fantasy football leagues. Smith was traded from Miami to Pittsburgh this offseason after a Pro Bowl season, a breakout season, in which he had compiled a ton of receiving stats. He put up 111 targets, 88 receptions, 884 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. He showed himself to be a dynamic receiving option for Miami, especially over the middle of the field at the tight end position. But if you're a Jonnu Smith truther like I am, you've known he's been a beast for years. I'm glad he finally got a real opportunity last season with Miami to be a starter after stints with Tennessee and Atlanta. And if you don't remember, he finished as a top 5 tight end in fantasy last season in Miami. So it is really confusing to me why he's going undrafted in so many leagues. I mean, in most of my drafts, I've taken a tight end early, but if I have a team with a really weak starting tight end, Jonnu Smith is a player I'm looking to add off of waivers onto my bench immediately. I mean, we know his ceiling. We saw it last year with that top 5 tight end finish. He could achieve that again. And when we think of Pittsburgh's offense, you can look at the receiving options across the board. They traded for wide receiver DK Metcalf this offseason. He's going to get a ton of volume as the team's wide receiver 1, especially with deep targets down the field. But apart from that, they have a couple unproven receivers. I mean, you have Roman Wilson, who was a day 2 draft pick last season out of Michigan. You have Calvin Austin III, who had some targets last season, did some stuff with the ball in his hands, a good yard after the catch guy. And overall, I think Wilson and Austin could be solid contributors to this passing game. But we could seriously see Jonnu Smith as the 2nd highest targeted player in this offense. Obviously, Pat Freiermuth is also there at the tight end position for Pittsburgh, but they brought in Jonnu Smith for a reason, to be that high-end receiving option at tight end. And with a lack of other experienced targets, they could lean on him heavily as their 2nd guy. With Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, he's not really a long-term option, but could provide some value for Smith this year. And with Smith being so good after the catch, he could be a very valuable weapon for this Pittsburgh offense. And I see him carving out a role almost immediately. He's such a good athlete. He can make some contested catches. I think he'll be all over the field this season. And who knows, maybe we see another top 10 tight end finish for Jonnu Smith in 2025. I mean, Rodgers is still a very solid quarterback. He could give him a lot of fantasy value. And Pittsburgh saw what Smith did in Miami last year. Maybe they're going to give him another 100 targets. And like I said before, if you have a weak starting tight end, Smith is the guy to add off of waivers. If you're looking for a high ceiling option that's owned in less than a quarter of all the ESPN leagues, he is your guy. The tight end position in fantasy being so top heavy, it is nice to have 2 solid tight ends on your roster at all times. And Smith has been a quality veteran in the league for quite some time now. I think he's going to have at least at his floor another solid season. But again, with all these guys, the common theme is simple. They are not owned in a lot of leagues. There is 0 risk involved with tacking them onto the end of your bench, especially with these rookie running backs. We saw some rookies doing amazing things last year in fantasy football, and this year's rookie running back class is truly special. I think some teams found some gems in the middle round, especially with Marks. I think he could be a very good player, and I think all 4 of these players are capable of top 24 seasons at least at their position. It's important to be on top of things heading into the fantasy football season in every single one of your leagues, and knowing who's on waivers and who you can add to give yourself a better shot at the championship is is extremely vital. In deeper leagues, these players could be starters by the end of the year. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Comment down below who your biggest sleepers are in fantasy football this season. If you agree with my takes, let me know. If you thought they were terrible, go ahead and comment something down there as well. Good luck in your week 1 matchups. I'm Joe, and this is Fantasy Trading Room.